Okay. We got a super cool episode coming up for you. Another Sabbat we're going to go over, so let's get going. Blessed be everybody, my name's Manon, and you are watching Witch in the Working, where we will be discussing all things witchy in and around, throughout and about, above, below, and beyond. So, we are halfway through the year, coming up on the longest day and shortest night of the year. This, in fact, is the second of 8 Sabbats we will eventually be discussing on this channel over the next year. Today, we will be talking about Midsummer. So, without further ado, let's get going and roll the intro. Welcome back, everybody. So, Midsummer's been called by many names throughout history and across the many pagan cultures. Alban Heflin in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, Litha or Vestalia in ancient Rome, All Couples Day in Greece, in Scotland, Faery Sabbat, Feast of Epona in Gaul, and Gathering Day in Wales. Midsummer does in fact mark the time of the summer solstice, which takes place different times of the year, but generally somewhere between June 19th and June 25th. This year it's June 20th. As I mentioned earlier, this is the longest day and shortest night of the year. So this also marks the very beginning of the dark half of the year in some cultures, as from the next day after Midsummer, the days slowly begin to become shorter and the nights longer. This will progress for approximately 6 months until the winter solstice or Yule, where the shortest day and the longest night occurs, the exact opposite of the summer solstice. Midsummer also marks the first day of summer, so it is that during this time of the year, the mother goddess in her story is known to be in full pregnancy. This is easily detected in nature because just as the goddess is pregnant containing full bounty, so is the Mother Earth. All of the Earth's bounties in agriculture and in wildlife alike are just waiting and growing in blissful development to burst forth with the bounty and new life in the months to come. However, this doesn't mean that the rites of fertility stopped with Beltane. As life and crops can be stillborn and blighted, our ancestors knew that the fertility magic and rites needed to be continued to guarantee growth and health amongst the still unborn and fully developed harvest in all forms. This being said, the ancient rites focused fertility at this time to nurturing new life in the ground, humans, and animal wombs. Motherhood, however, is not the focus of this Sabbat. Midsummer is a solar festival. The focus is on the god, the father of all that is brewing, awaiting birth to bring bounty to this earth and our lives. At this time, the sun is at its highest point in the sky. This is representative of the many sun gods throughout the many cultures and at the peak of his life. His strongest, most dominant phase in his journey through the cycles. In his story, moving forward, just as the waxing year or the light half of the year gives way to the waning year or the dark half of the year, so does the god see his most dominant point in life and now will begin to grow older after this day, until Samhain, where he will basically journey into the Summerlands, parting the veils until his birth at Yule. So just as human men eventually reach a high point in their life, they too begin to wane and become older and wiser until death, just like our horn god mentioned here. So, all of our Sabbats in some way reflect fire festivals. It is most obvious and compelling during Midsummer. It's the beginning of the days of heat. This can especially be felt in my hometown here in South Florida. In fact, unlike most people's, here in Florida, a lot of us look very much forward to the fall and winter months because it cools off considerably. Here, during the summer, which is long and lasting, temperatures often soar into the high 90s and low 100s, and with the humidity attached, dude, seriously. We worship and very much welcome the cooler months. It doesn't snow here, and in the cooler months, we usually regulate in the dreamy 70s with an occasional cold snap dropping down into the low 50s or 40s for all of about 3 days if we're lucky. So during the summer, yes, it's very, very muggy and hot here, and it's a great example of how we personally experience Midsummer. Fire played a major part in our ancient ancestors' rites, as fire is the most relevant of the elements when it comes to transformation. As it was during Beltane, balefires were still produced and very important to a lot of our ancient pagan peoples during Midsummer. The ancient Celts kept balefires burning all throughout their countrysides during Midsummer, just as they did for Beltane. Through these flames, many of their rituals and festivities would take place, ensuring health, wealth, and joy throughout the villages, towns, and communities. Even to this day, in modern times, in certain parts of Europe and the world in fact, many balefires and old customs still are carried out and are demonstrated in many cultures. There are many stories of how the god and goddess play out their cycles. In fact, there are as many stories of this as there is pagan cultures itself. My personal preference of the god and goddess story is very much a human cycle that we live as in our own human lives. I like to see the god at his high point and strongest, most dominant self at Midsummer. As the year wanes towards Lammas, so does our Lord, while the goddess grows and develops ever more pregnant. Eventually, at the arrival of Mabon, or the autumnal equinox, the god is now an old man, waning in strength evermore, just as the sun naturally does too, but our god becoming ever more wiser in his old age. Finally, at Samhain, our god crosses over, parting the veils into the Summerlands, where he awaits rebirth through the mother goddess at Yule. In some stories, in some parts of Europe, the sun god actually passes into the Summerlands the day after the summer solstice, marking the first day of the waning year. For instance, in Scotland, a cauldron is utilized during the midsummer rites. This is to, in essence, represent the mother goddess, known as Caradwen, a crone goddess, and the cauldron of rebirth. This reminds us that the god is not truly dead, but is just awaiting his rebirth, again, come Yule. In some cultures, such as Greece, mock funerals were held to represent the death of the sun god, the night after Midsummer took place. Also, this marked out the time to begin to look forward to the coming harvest right around the corner during the harvest months of August through October. Many cultures celebrated in this fashion. Even the ancient Norse processed in a funeral-like manner to their celebration grounds in the countryside, along with their animals and families all in tow. Like most of our pagan holidays, the Christians too have a few holidays that take advantage of our pagan rites during Midsummer. So many of the Christian holidays today, Christmas, Easter, All Saints' Day, and many others, all were developed and utilized by the early church to try and convert our pagan ancestors to follow Christianity. Check out my info box above or the link below to see a video I created that will go trace over these matters. Anyways, these two summer solstice holidays I'm speaking of that the Christians incorporated are St. John's Day and Whitsunday. Like most of the Christian holidays, St. John's Day was created to draw attention away from the pagan Midsummer Sabbat. This was in fact put into place by the insistence of Ireland's own St. Patrick and is a feast day for our Christian friends. They even went as far as portraying Midsummer as a very unlucky day and a day that if celebrated could cause death to your animals or blighted crops, for instance. The fairy folk are very prevalent at this time too, more so than any other time of the year. This being said, another discouraging tactic used by the church was to spread rumors and falsities that if one was to go out on midsummer nights, the fae would trick them and take them or their livestock, take them away, never to be heard from again, like a spiritual kidnapping. Whitsunday or Whitsuntide is the 15th day after Easter and is yet another holiday that was used to draw attention away from Midsummer. Again, bonfires would be lit to celebrate this holiday as well in a manner of if you can't beat them, join them type scenario. The practice of bonfires being lit, however, has in modern times been replaced by lighting candles for this particular holiday. Midsummer is also a time when many of our ancestors, and still our modern peoples today, harvest the many herbs that grow throughout the countrysides during this time. In fact, I'm going to use this as a segue to introduce one of my witchy friends who makes herbs, oils, and has a small shop that she does all kinds of really cool witchy things. Imaris Magic and Craft. She so nicely sent me a bottle of some midsummer incense. Let me see if I can get this in focus for you. Cool. Got a charcoal going here. Gonna try out some of this kicking incense here. Smells very woodsy without being burned. Let's see. You should always take a sip of coffee before you smell incense. Totally kidding around. Don't have to take coffee. I don't even know why I said that. Anyway. That's a great incense. It actually, it smells very earthy, like it's very woodsy, like you're walking through the woods. That's awesome. So Imaris has a little store online that she's started up recently, and she's a fellow witch friend of ours who is, you know, following her dream, you know, trying to help others and make things and create things for people to help get them going in witchcraft and Wicca and whatnot, and I totally applaud her. But I got her link to her store down below. Give it a visit. She makes all of her own oils and incense, and you know, like we showed here, she's local here in South Florida, and she'll be happy to send them out to you. Anyways, so as I mentioned earlier, in Wales, Midsummer is called Gathering Day, and this is a time when peoples of villages would venture out to harvest their share of herbs from Mother Earth. The ancient Druids were another culture whom took advantage of these harvests. They would especially look forward to harvesting their endeared and sacred mistletoe. To them, mistletoe held great magical powers and was believed to have been blessed by God, specifically when harvested alongside or upon an oak tree. It was believed they would harvest this herb with a golden sickle, keeping it sacred to the gods and goddesses. Many cultures adapted the use of mistletoe as a very sacred herb, including Italy, France, Rome, and all the way to Japan. The Swedish peoples alike also saw mistletoe as a very sacred to their god, Balder and goddess Frigga. Other sacred herbs to midsummer is vervain and lavender. Lavender is often used in a lot of incense and oil brews by pagans today, and even quite a bit in cakes and other recipes during the summer months. Lavender is also considered by some to work wonders in love spells and is considered to be a powerful aphrodisiac in the right recipes. You can even go out and collect pine cones as well during midsummer to be used as powerful talismans of protection, virility, and fertility. If you decide to go out on midsummer and collect herbs, take with you a knife and a cloth, or quite a few cloths actually, to keep the herbs separate, and of course, some kind of basket or container to hold them in. It's very important that you have a good book that identifies the herbs you're harvesting. Can't stress this enough. The last thing you want to do is poison yourself or others because you weren't positive about a specific identity of an herb or plant and decided to ingest it on accident thinking it was going to make a great, you know, ingredient for your latest cupcake. If you already happen to grow your own herbs, then good for you. Very, very witchy, and kudos to you. Many witches have a special curved white-handled knife called a bowline, specifically used as a sacred instrument to harvest these herbs. I discuss more about a bowline and or white-handled knife in the info box above or the link below, and the videos about tools of a witch. This special sacred tool isn't absolutely necessary, but if you're gonna walk this path, why not go for it and get one? You won't regret it, and it will definitely help you to mentally and spiritually synchronize with the special energies that exude during this harvesting process. When harvesting the herbs, never take more than a third of the plant and always thank the plant, either out loud or within, for its sacrifice. In Gardnerian craft, we actually teach our own to leave a small gift to the plant, usually a small crystal, like you take it and you push it down an inch or two into the soil. It's believed by us to help give back energy to the plant to regrow its loss. Once the herb is cut, it's very important that it doesn't touch the ground, as it's believed that the energy that the herb or plant contains will be grounded and sucked back into the earth, therefore rendering your harvest magicless. Wrap the harvest immediately in the cloth that you brought with you and place it in your basket or container until you get home. When you get home, hang your herbs to dry in a nice warm dry place, like in your kitchen or by a fireplace. Avoid hanging them in moist areas like a basement, for instance, as the intention is for them to dry out over the next few weeks or months, not become a moldy ball of blah. Bundle the herbs of like species together with some twine and hang them to do this drying process. You can do this whole process I just discussed about herbs with wildflowers too. These can be used to decorate or even used in some oils and incense recipes. There are dozens of books you can obtain to guide you to choosing and harvesting herbs and flowers. I've linked a few below. Get one before you just head out and start harvesting and know what you're harvesting. Again, it's very dangerous practice otherwise. A tool that is commonly gathered during midsummer is a staff. Many of our ancestors who would wander off into the hills during midsummer to harvest herbs would bring along a staff to assist them. In Ireland, this staff is called a shillelagh and was utilized by Irishmen and of course the infamous leprechauns. Most often these staffs were created by the sacred blackthorn tree. On the counter side of this, in England, the sacred wood used to make staves is oak or birch, and in fact, to an Englishman, the blackthorn isn't sacred at all, but cursed. This is just cultural differences, however, and you should choose whichever suits yourself. The ancient Teutons would ritually gather ash sticks to make wands and staves, as in their culture the ash tree was of their sacred Yggdrasil, the Norse tree of life. The best way to get your own staff or wand is to find one in nearby woods or forest that the particular tree is naturally dropped. If you do decide to harvest your own, make sure you again thank the tree and its spirits for their sacrifice to you. Of all the Sabbats, Midsummer is also the one most likely to actually be celebrated during the daytime, or at least started during the daytime moving into the nighttime, finishing off with a balefire to dance and feast around. Many of our pagan ancestors would carry off with them a rooster to their sacred space and greet the midsummer day morning sun with the same cries and crows as the rooster. Even here in the United States, the many North American Indian tribes would celebrate midsummer by dancing and calling to the gods and goddesses to help the corn grow and have a successful harvest. They would also do fertility dances utilizing staffs that represented the male and female genitalia, and some even did rain dances to call on the gods to water their crops and ensure successful growth and harvest. As I mentioned earlier, the Fae are also very prominent during the summer months. In earlier times, the fairy folk were heavily honored and worked with on a symbiotic level until they were ultimately demonized by the church and peoples began to fear them. The church began to explain rumors that the fairy could make children sick or even wind up missing and cause milk to sour and animals to expire. As a protection, early peoples began driving their livestock, children, and loved ones around and sometimes over balefires. This was thought to use fire to purify, as we do today in many pagan rituals for many occasions. Children would sometimes wear special herbs around their necks during midsummer to protect against the mischievous fae folk. In fact, in England, the song All Around the Mulberry Bush was developed by the fact that children would dance around the bush as protection against the fae folk. To learn more about the truth of the fairy realms, click on my info box above or the link below to see my video on the fairy realm. Our pagan ancestors would also use this midsummer time to bless their animals and/or pets. Many times, a token animal would be taken from the field and blessed and honored and given charms of protection, health, and good well-being. This being said, this is also an excellent Sabbat to honor and give your own pets charms, amulets, or talismans of protection and good health and longevity. You can do this by carving a charm for them and having them wear it on their collar, for instance. Use a wood burner to carve a rune or sigil to relay your magical symbolic message to your pet. Every witch should own a Dremel and a wood burner as far as I'm concerned. Just my opinion, people. Finally, the last thing I want to go over in the topic of midsummer is the Oak King and the Holly King. This old story portrays the beginning and ending cycles of the waxing and waning of the year as it progresses annually. Some cultures use the robin and the wren instead of the oak and holly kings. The Oak King represents the light or waxing time of the year, which is the winter solstice, December 20th through 22nd, through to the summer solstice, which is around June 19th through the 25th approximately. The Holly King represents the waning or dark half of the year, which is from the summer solstice to the winter solstice. Each king takes a turn annually, ruling over each 6-month term half of the year. Every midsummer, the Oak and Holly King battle for supremacy, and every midsummer, the Holly King wins the battle, therefore reigning over the dark half of the year until Yule, the winter solstice. On the winter solstice, once again, the Oak King and the Holly King battle it out. Only this time, the Oak King reigns supreme and rules over the light half of the year from the winter solstice to the summer solstice. This is a very common story that is played out with a mock battle in most British traditional witchcraft covens such as Gardnerian and Alexandrian witchcraft traditions of Wicca. This battle is usually done with an older gentleman and a younger gentleman to represent the two kings, with the younger covener being victorious each time to represent whichever king reigning victorious to rule the coming half of the year. In fact, my band Witch's Mark has a song we wrote about this famous battle, which I've linked below with the words so you can check it out if you wish. That little piece of music that happens during the intro at the beginning of Witch in the Working is in fact the music for this particular song. Many pagan gatherings around the world take place during this time of midsummer as well. This is no coincidence. This is our natural urge to gather together as some of our ancestors did for centuries and share, mingle, and catch up like they did on the hillsides throughout the past. I personally know of quite a few midsummer pagan gatherings that occur annually each year with this exact intent and energy. Circle Sanctuary is one very popular event held in southwestern Wisconsin each year and headed by one Selena Fox, a very popular Wiccan priestess throughout the years, heavily influencing a lot of the pagan communities at large. Okay, So we come to the end of my brief but hopefully insightful lesson on Midsummer, Litha, or summer solstice, whatever you want to call it. There is so much more to discuss about this Sabbat that I encourage you to do some of your own research. That's what books and Google is for, people, so use them. Some of my witchy fellow YouTubers have plenty of videos on Midsummer too this time of year. Olivia with The Witch of Wonderlust, Hearth with Hearth Witch, Thorn Mooney, Scarlet Ravenswood, Nike the Warrior Witch, Shadow Harvest, and so many others. I have their links down below to check out their channels too. Very talented witches and pagans. This being said, have you ever attended a midsummer ritual? If so, let us all know in the comments down below. Click that subscribe button and ring that bell to be notified of my future videos, and give this video a thumbs up or down. I love you guys and gals. Have an awesome midsummer this weekend, and blessed be. Till next time, see you later.